ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Namaste, my dear friends. Today I am going to give a video on the power of Arunachala. By seeing Chidambaram, by being born in Tiruvarur, by dying in Kasi, or by merely thinking of Arunachala, one will surely attain liberation. The supreme knowledge, knowledge of the self, the import of Vedanta, which cannot be attained without great difficulty, can easily be attained by anyone who sees the form of this hill from wherever it is visible, or who even thinks of it by mind from a far distance. Such is the assurance given by Lord Shiva in the Arunachala Mahatmya about the power of the mere thought of Arunachala, and this assurance has received striking confirmation from the life and teachings of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi. In the second line of the first verse of Sri Arunachala Ashtakam, Sri Bhagwan tells us that from his very earliest childhood, when he when he knew no other thing, Arunachala was shining his mind as the most great, and this thought of Arunachala so worked in his mind that at the age of 16, a great fear of death arose in him and turned his mind selfwards to drown forever in its source. In his writings, Sri Bhagwan has repeatedly confirmed the mysterious power that the thought of Arunachala has over the mind. In his Tamil in his Tamil collected works under the picture of Arunachala, there is a verse that can be considered as his Dhyana Sloka, verse of contemplation upon his Sadguru Arunachala Shiva. In this verse he sings, "This is Arunachala Shiva, the ocean of grace that bestows liberation when thought of." In the first verse of Sri Arunachala Aksaramanammalai, the marital garland of letters, he sings, "O Arunachala, you root out the ego of those who think of you in the heart as Arunachala." In the 102nd verse of Aksara Manamalai, he sings, "O Arunachala, the moment I thought of Arunai, the holy town of Arunachala, I was caught in the trap of your grace. Can the net of your grace ever fail?" And in the last line of the second verse of Sri Arunachala, Navamani Malai, the necklet of nine gems, he sings, Mukti Ninanika Varul Arunachalam, meaning Arunachala, the mere thought of which bestows liberation. But only in the 10th verse of Sri Arunachala Patikam does Sri Bhagwan actually reveal how the thought of Arunachala works in the mind to root out the ego. In this verse he sings, "I have seen a wonder, a magnetic hill that forcibly attracts the soul, arresting the activities of the soul who thinks of it even once, drawing it to face itself. the one making it thus motionless like itself. It feeds upon that sweet, pure, and ripened soul. What a wonder is this, O souls, be saved by thinking of this great Arunagiri, which shine in the mind as the destroyer of the soul, the ego. The words Oru Tanadu Abhimuktam Iritu, drawing it to face itself, the one used here by Sri Bhagwan are a mystic way of saying drawing the soul to turn inwards and face self, the one reality. Thus, in this verse, Sri Bhagwan reveals how the thought of Arunachala works within the mind to arrest its activities, to attract its attention towards self, and thereby to make it still. In other words, Sri Bhagwan assures that the thought of Arunachala will lead the mind to the path of self inquiry, the direct path for all, as indeed happened in his own case. Knowing from personal experience this unique power of Arunachala, Sri Bhagwan confidently advises us in the last line of this verse. O souls, be saved by thinking of this great Arunagiri, which shines in the mind as the destroyer of the soul. The form of Arunachala. Sri Bhagwan has said that Arunachala is the Supreme Self that shines as I in the hearts of all living beings. In other words, Arunachala is truly the non dual reality that transcends time, space, name, and form. Hence, many of the verses in the five hymns to Arunachala, being very mystic in nature, can well be interpreted as applying to the nameless and formless self rather than to the name and form of Arunachala. For this reason, some devotees tend to view Sri Bhagwan's revelation about the power of Arunachala as being purely allegorical, and if you even ask when Arunachala is the self, why should we attach any particular importance to this hill? In order to understand more fully the importance that Sri Bhagwan attached to the name and form of this hill, it is necessary for us to take a broad view of his teachings. In verse 4 of Ulladu Narpadu, the 40 verses on reality, Sri Bhagwan says, if oneself is a form, the the world and God will also be likewise. That is, they will also be forms. In the first line of the third verse of Sri Arunachala Ashtakam, he addresses Arunachala and sings, when I approach you regarding you as having form, you stand here as a hill on the earth. That is, so long as we identify the body as I, it is equally true that this hill is God. Indeed, Sri Bhagwan used to say that because we identify the body as I, Lord Shiva, the Supreme Reality, out of his immense compassion for us, identifies this hill as I so that we may see him, think of him, and thereby receive his grace and guidance only to reveal your transcendent state without speech. That is through silence. You stand as a hill shining from earth to sky. Sings Sri Bhagwan in the last line of the second verse of Sri Arunachala Ashtakam. So long as we feel the name and form of our body to the eye, we cannot conceive God as being anything but a name and form. Even if we think that God is formless and very thought about God itself is a form, a mere mental conception. This is why Sri Bhagwan says in the second line of the third verse of Ashtakam, if one tries to think of your nature as formless, he is like one who wanders throughout the world to see the sky. Being the perfect spiritual master that he was, Sri Bhagwan knew well how important and necessary is the form of God for the human mind, which is ever attached to forms, and from his own personal experience he knew the unique power of the form of Arunachala, a power that cannot be found in such abundance in any other form of God, namely the power to turn the mind toward the self and thereby to root out the ego. In verse 11 of Sri Arunachala Patikam, Sri Bhagwan exclaims with joy and wonder, Lo, how many are there like me who have been destroyed by thinking this hill to be the supreme, thereby assuring us that if we regard this hill as God, our egos will surely be destroyed. Though Arunachala appears outwardly as a hill of mere insentient rock, the true devotee understands it to be the all-knowing, all-loving, and all-powerful Supreme Lord, who is guiding him both from within and without at every step and turn of life, leading him steadily and surely toward the goal of egolessness. What a wonder! It stands as if an insentient hill, yet its action is mysterious, impossible for anyone to understand. Sing the Sri Bhagwan in the first line of Sri Arunachala Ashtakam. The name of Arunachala, of all the names of God, the name dearest to the heart of Sri Bhagwan was Arunachala. Every one of the 100 verses of Sri Arunachala Aksarmanamalai ends with the name Arunachala and the refrain is Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. From the great love that Sri Bhagwan had for this name, it is clear that he regarded it as being no less powerful than the form of Arunachala. This fact is confirmed very in verse 70 of Aksaramanammalai, in which Sri Bhagwan sings, O Arunachala, the very moment I thought of your name, you caught me and drew me to yourself. Who can understand your greatness? There are many incidents in the life of Sri Bhagwan that illustrate his great love for the divine name Arunachala. But perhaps the most striking occurred during his last moments, about 25 minutes before he left his body. The assembled devotees began to chant Aksara Manamalai, hearing the name of his beloved Arunachala. Sri Bhagwan opened his eye, which shone with love, and tears of ecstasy rolled down his cheeks. Though Sri Bhagwan never gave mantra diksha nor formally accepted anyone as his disciple, many devotees believe that Arunachala is the Nama mantra that he has bestowed upon the whole world. When a guru formally gives a mantra to his disciple, he explains to him the meaning and significance of each letter of the mantra and tells him the fruit to be gained by meditating upon that mantra. In the same manner, in the second verse of Sri Arunachala Navamani Malai, Sri Bhagwan has explained the meaning of each syllable in the name Arunachala, and he has declared that mere thought of this name will bestow liberation. From this we can infer that Arunachala is the Jnana Panchakshari, the five-syllable mantra that bestows jnana. Moreover, tradition tells us that when a mantra is given by a jnani and when he explains the significance of each syllable of that mantra, he is actually putting his own power into that mantra. Therefore, if any devotees of Sri Bhagwan wish to have a mantra, they can very well take Arunachala to be the mantra openly given to them by him. The power of the name Arunachala was once directly confirmed by Sri Bhagwan. In 1948, a certain devotee came to him from Bombay and with him he brought a notebook in which he had written the name Arunachala Shiva many thousands of times. On the last page of this notebook, the devotee wrote a prayer to the following effect: O Bhagwan, in the life of Sarda Devi, the wife of Sri Ramakrishna, it is written that she had said that if even an animal dies in Kansi, it will attain liberation. Therefore, graciously bestow upon me the boon of death in Kansi and gave the notebook to Sri Bhagwan. Bhagwan looked through the notebook and when he came to the last page, he read out loud the devotee's prayer. At once expressed the greatest surprise and exclaimed, Samarnat Arunachalam. The words Samarnat Arunachalam mean by remembering Arunachala and they occur in the very same Sanskrit verse that says that by dying in Kasi one will attain liberation. Bhagwan then turned to the revolving bookcase by his side and took out a book, probably the Arunachala Mahatyam. O- Opening it as if at random, he read out a sentence in Tamil that said, On one Arunachala is equal power to 1 crore Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya is believed by Sevas all over India to be the most sacred and powerful mantra. After reading out a few other portions of this book that emphasize the unique greatness and power of Arunachala, Sri Bhagwan finally laid it aside and explained to the devotee that not everyone can see Chidambaram, not everyone can be born in Tiruvarur, and not everyone can die in Kansi, but anyone and everyone can think of Arunachala from wherever they may be, and thereby they will surely attain liberation. From this incident, we can understand how unhesitatingly Sri Bhagwan encouraged devotees to have absolute faith in Arunachala. If devotees of a skeptical frame of mind came to him and asked him how mere thought of Arunachala could bestow liberation, he used to explain the allegorical significance of this saying, since that alone would satisfy their mind. But if devotees came to him with simple childlike faith, he would strengthen their faith and confirm the literal meaning of this saying, since he knew from personal experience the great power of the name and form of Arunachala. The unique sanctity of Arunachala. In India, there are countless holy places, etc., that are sacred to Lord Shiva or to some other name and form of God, and many of them are more well known and popular than Arunachala. Yet there is a verse in the Arunachala Mahatmyam, which has been selected and translated into Tamil by Sri Bhagwan that says, Arunachala is truly the holy place of all holy places. It is the most sacred. Know that it is the heart of the world. It is truly Shiva himself. It is his heart abode, a, a secret, etc. In that place the Lord ever abides the hill of light named Arunachala. Whenever Sri Bhagwan asked about the special sanctity of Arunachala, he used to explain that other holy places such as Kailas, Kansi and Chidambaram are sacred because they are the abodes of Lord Shiva, whereas Arunachala is Lord Shiva himself. However, as the above verse of Arunachala Mahatmyam says, Arunachala is a secret Akshetra because it is this place that bestows jnana and become most people have so many other desires and do not truly want jnana. Arunachala has always remained comparatively little known, but to those few who seek jnana, Arunachala always makes itself known through some means or other. The unique sanctity and power of Arunachala Akshetra was once confirmed by an incident that happened in the life of Sri Bhagwan. Because of his great love for Sri Bhagwan, a certain devotee wanted to take him to his native place Chidambaram. But rather than directly ask Sri Bhagwan to come to Chidambaram, he began to ask him if he had ever been to see Lord Nataraja in Chidambaram temple. When Sri Bhagwan replied that he had not, the devotee began to describe the greatness of Chidambaram, saying that it was the most sacred Shiva Akshetra in South India, that so many saints and sages had lived there and had sung in praise of Lord Nataraja, and so on and so forth. Sri Bhagwan listened to all he said with patient int- inter- interest, but showed no sign of wanting to visit Chidambaram. Seeing this, the devotee at last said, Chidambaram is even greater than Arunachala, because among the Panchabhuta Lingams, the Lingams representing the five elements, Chidambaram is the space Lingam, while Arunachala is only the fire Lingam. Since the four elements earth, water, air, and fire finally have to merge in space, space is the principal element. Hearing this, Sri Bhagwan smiled and said, all the five elements come into existence only when Shakti seemingly forsakes her identify with Lord Shiva, the Supreme Self, Paramatman, Paramat, Paramatman. Since the five elements are thus only the creation of Shakti, she is superior to all of them. Therefore, more important than the place where the elements merge is the place where Shakti herself merges. Because Shakti is dancing in Chidambaram, Lord Shiva has to dance before her and therefore make her become motionless. But in Arunachala, Lord Shiva remains ever motionless, Achala, and hence Shakti automatically and effortlessly merges in him through great love. Therefore, Arunachala shines as the foremost and most powerful Akshetra. Because here Shakti, who has seemingly created all these manifold appearances, herself merges into the Lord. So, for those mature aspirants who seek to put an end to the false appearance of duality, the most powerful help is to be found only in Arunachala Kshetra. Subsequently, on 24th June 1928, Sri Bhagwan summarized this reply of his in the form of a verse which later became the first verse of Sri Arunachala Navamani Malai. In this verse he says, though Though he is truly motionless by nature, in the court of Chidambaram, Lord Shiva dances before Shakti, thereby making her motionless. But know that in Tiruvannamalai, Lord Arunachala shines triumphant that Shakti having merged in his motionless form. The Gurutvam of Arunachala. Arunachala has always been renowned as the bestower of liberation, the destroyer of the ego, the remover of the false notion in the body, as the Jnanam Guru par excellence. Jnana Guru par excellence. When Brahma and Vishnu began to quarrel, being deluded by pride and egoism, Lord Arunachala Shiva appeared before them in the form of a column of fire, thereby vanquishing their egoism and teaching them true knowledge. When Shakti, goddess Parvati, wished to attain a state in which she could do no wrong, Lord Shiva sent her to Arunachala, where she merged and became one with him. Thus, even to Brahma and Vishnu, Arunachala was Guru, and to Parvati it was the place where she lost her separate individuality. Throughout the ages, saints and sages have sung verses in Sanskrit, Tamil, and other Indian languages extolling the unique power of Arunachala to root out the ego and to bestow self knowledge. All the four great Seva sages of Tamil Nadu, Manikavachgar, Sundramaruti, S- Sundramurti, Apar, and Jnana Sambandhar have sung in praise of Arunachala. In one verse, often pointed out by Sri Bhagwan, Jnana Sambandhar described this hill as being Jnana Tiral, a dense mass of Jnana, and Sundramurti singing in Tiruvanna, Tiruvannaika remembers Arunachala and sings, O Annamalai, you can be known only to those who give up the attachment of the body. These Puranic stories and songs of ancient sages all confirm the fact that Arunachala is the supreme Jnana Guru. But this fact has received its most striking confirmation from Sri Bhagwan. In verse 19 of Aksharamanamlai, he explicitly states that Arunachala signs as the form of his Guru, and in the same verse he reveals the function of the real Guru, namely to destroy all our defects, including the root defect is the ego, to bestow all good qualities upon us and to rule over us. In many of his other verses, Sri Bhagwan has clearly indicated that the role of Arunachala is the role of Sadguru. For example, in Aksharamanamlai, he sings that Arunachala roots out the ego of those who think of it. Verse 1, that it annihilates those who approach it as God. Verse 48, and that it destroys the attachment of those who come to it with attachment. Verse 77, he also reveals that Arunachala instructs through silence, verse 36, and that it teaches the path of self-inquiry, verse 44, and he shows us the way of praying to Arunachala to bestow jnana, verse 40, to reveal self as the reality, verse 43, and to make us give up the attachment to the body, verse 75. He has also confirmed from his own experience the power of Arunachala as Guru. In verse 8 of Sri Arunachala Naumanamalai, he sings that in order to put an end to his sufferings in the world, Arunachala gave me his own state, and in verse 9 he describes the wonder of Arunachala grace, saying, you entered my mind, drew me, and established me in your own state. All that Sri Bhagwan has said about the power of Arunachala tallies exactly with what he has said about the power of the Guru. In verse 268 of Guru Vachaka Koai, the garland of Guru's sayings, he says that the Guru is he who possesses the supreme power to make any soul who comes to him merge into self. the knowledge beyond all speech. The Guru works in many ways to make the disciple merge into self. He gives a push from without and exerts a pull from within, so that you may be fixed in the center, says Sri Bhagwan in Maharishi's Gospel, page 36. From without, the Guru gives a verbal instructions to turn the disciple's mind towards self, and he also enables the disciple to have association satsanga with his form and thereby to gain the necessary strength and love to turn within and attend to self. To give verbal instructions, it is necessary for the Guru to be in human form, but to give satsanga and subtle inner guidance, he may be in any form. Sri Bhagwan has come as the Guru in human form to give us all the necessary verbal instructions, and he has revealed that Arunachala is the Guru in the form of a hill with which we can always have satsang. Like any human body, the human form of the Guru will inevitably pass away one day, whereas the form of Arunachala will always remain. Thus, though Sri Bhagwan has left his human form, he has provided us with all the requisite outward help. He has left us with a permanent record of his verbal teachings, and he has shown us a form with which we can always have satsang. Therefore, for the devotees of Sri Bhagwan, there will never be any need to search for another outer guru, because all the necessary help and guidance is ever available for us in the form of teachings of Sri Bhagwan and the satsang of Arunachala. The power of the satsang of Arunachala was often confirmed by Sri Bhagwan. Dr. T. N. Krishna Swami records in the Ramana pictorial souvenir, page 7, that Sri Bhagwan said to him, "The whole hill is sacred, it is Shiva himself, just as we identify ourselves with the body, so Shiva has chosen to identify himself with his hill. Arunachala is pure wisdom, jnana in the form of a hill. It is out of compassion to those who seek him that he has chosen to reveal himself in the form of a hill, visible to the eye. The seeker will obtain guidance and solace by staying near this hill. Arunachala Pardakshina. Arunachala is the physical embodiment of Sattva, the reality, and hence to have contact with it in any manner is satsang. To think of Arunachala is satsang. To see Arunachala is satsang. And to live near Arunachala is satsang. But one very special way of having satsang with Arunachala is to do Arunagiri Pardikshina, circumambulation around the hill. That it is to walk barefoot around the hill, keeping it to one's right side. The great importance that Sri Bhagwan attached to Giri Pardakshina is well known to all the devotees who lived with him. He himself did Pardakshina countless times, and he actively and spontaneously encouraged devotees to follow his example. Bhagwan, who scarcely ever gave advice to devotees unless asked, wholeheartedly encouraged their going round the hill as conducive to progress in sadhana, writes Lucia Osborne in the Mountain Path, January 1974, page 3. Devraja Mudaliar records that the importance of Pradakshina became evident to him from the frequent references by Bhagwan himself to its great significance and from the fact that thousands of people do it, including almost all the close disciples of Bhagwan, even those who may be considered the most advanced among them. Though comparatively little has been recorded of what Sri Bhagwan used to say about the power of Pradakshina, there is no doubt that he considered it to be an act having great spiritual efficacy. In fact, he used to say that the benefits which can be gained by meditation and various other forms of mind control only after great struggle and effort will be effortlessly gained by those who go round the hill. Bhagwan often said that those unable to meditate would succeed in their endeavor by circumambulating Arunachala, writes Surinagamma in My Life at Sri Ramanashram, page 144. Kunja Swaim recorded on page 108 of Anadu Ninai Bhugal that Bhagwan once told him, "What is better than Pradakshina? That alone is sufficient." While extolling the spiritual efficacy of Pradakshina, Sri Bhagwan sometimes used to narrate the story of King Vajrangada Pandya, which is told in the Arunachala Mahatmayam. Vajranga Pandya was a powerful monarch who ruled over most of the South India, but one day he was told by some celestial being that in this previous birth he had been Indra, the ruler of heaven, and that if he worshipped Arunachala he could regain his former position. On hearing this, he at once renounced his kingdom and with the intense desire to become Indra, he began to worship Arunachala by going round the hill 3 times a day. After 3 years of such worship, Lord Shiva appeared before him and offered him any boon he wished to pray for. Though his original ambition had been to become Indra, his mind had been matured by doing so many pradakshinas. He now realized that it was worthless to pray for such a transitory pleasure. He therefore prayed to Lord Shiva for the eternal happiness of self-knowledge. This story thus aptly illustrates that even if a person begins to do pradakshina for the fulfillment of worldly desires, his mind will in time be matured and he will gain proper discrimination, viveka, desirelessness, vairagya, and love for self. Svatma Bhakti. Generally, whenever sages or scriptures prescribe any form of dualistic worship, whether for the fulfillment of worldly desires or for the attainment of self knowledge, they always say that it must be done with faith. But Sri Bhagwan used to say that the power of Arunachala is such that even if one does Pradakshina with no faith, it will still have its effect and will surely purify the mind. Devaraja Mudalia records on page 64 of my recollection that Sri Bhagwan told him, "For everybody it is good to make circuit of the hill. It does not even matter whether one has faith in this pradakshina or not. Just as fire will burn all who touches it whether they believe it or not, so the hill will do good to all those who go round it. Because Arunachala is the fire of knowledge, Jnanagni in the form of a hill. The outgoing tendencies, vasanas of the mind are automatically scorched when one goes round it. When damp wood is brought closer to a fire, it will gradually be dried and at a certain point it will itself catch fire. Similarly, when the mind which is soaked with worldly tendencies goes round the hill, the tendencies will gradually dry up and at a certain point the mind will become fit to be burnt by the fire of jnana. That is why Sri Bhagwan said to Kunja Swami, "This hill is the storehouse of all spiritual power. Going round it benefits you in all ways." The Mountain Path, April 1979, page 75. The spiritual benefits of Pradakshina have been described by Sri Sadhu Om in one of his Tamil poems, Sri Arunachala Pradakshina Mambu. In verse 6 and 7, he says, a cow grazing round and round its pack does not know that the length of its rope is thereby decreasing. Similarly, when you go round and round Arunachala, how can your mind know that it is he thereby subsiding? When the cow goes round more and more, at one point it will be bound tightly to its pack. Similarly, when the mind lovingly goes more and more round Anamlai, Arunachala, which is self, it will finally stand still in self-abidance, having lost all its moments virtues. In verse 8 he says, it is well proven truth that the minds of those devotees who ever go round Anamlai achieve great love to turn within towards self. Anamlai is the blazing wild hill of fire, the fire of jnana that burns all our worldly desires into ashes. And in verse 9 he gives the simile of a piece of iron being rubbed against a magnet. Just as the scattered atoms of iron are all aligned by the magnet to face in one uniform direction, thereby transforming the iron into a magnet. So when a person goes round Arunachala, the divine magnet, his scattered mind is turned towards self and is thereby transformed into self. Sri Muruganar, who was a great sage and one of the foremost disciples of Sri Bhagwan, was noted as a staunch lover of Pradakshina. In the days of Sri Bhagwan, he used to write to any friends who were coming to see him, you will find me either in Bhagwan's hall or on the Gri Pradakshina road. And it is said that at one time he even used to go round the hill daily. How he first came to know about the greatness of Gri Pradakshina is related by Kunjo Swami in the Mountain Path, April 1979, page 83, as follows. Sometime after he came here, Sri Muruganar asked Bhagwan about the spiritual benefit of going round the hill, Giri Pradakshina. Bhagwan asked him to go round it first and then come to him. Sri Muruganar followed his advice and told Bhagwan that he lost his Dehatma Buddhi, sense of identification with the body, after a while and regained it only after reaching Adi Anamlai, a village on the way. He reported to Sri Bhagwan that the experience was unexpected and unique. Sri Bhagwan smiled and said, do you now understand? This incident proves very clearly the power of Pradakshina, and it shows that mature souls can even lose their sense of identification with the body by going round the hill. It also illustrates what Sri Bhagwan meant when he used to say that while going round the hill, one can experience sanchara samadhi, a thought-free state of bliss while walking. Though such a thought-free state is not experienced by all devotees when they go round the hill, that does not mean that their pradakshina is not yielding fruit. The main benefit of pradakshina is that the tendencies, vasanas, are slowly made to lose their grip over the mind. But just as a child cannot easily perceive its own growth, so the mind cannot easily perceive the weakening of its own vasanas. However, one very notable feature about Pradakshina that can be perceived by anyone and which clearly indicates its spiritual efficacy is the extraordinary power of attraction it exerts over the minds of devotees. For no special reason, one feels attracted to go round Arunachala again and again. Go round the hill once, you will see that it will attract you, said Sri Bhagwan to Devraja Mudaliar. My recollection, page 65. Bhagwan used to say that if one went round the hill once or twice, the hill itself would draw one to go round it again. I have found it true. Now this is happening to Dr. Sayyid, writes Devraja Mudaliar in Day by Day with Bhagwan, 19th December 1945. In letters from Sri Ramanasram, Volume 2, Letter 98, Sri Nagamma records Sri Bhagwan as saying, the dhyana meditation that you cannot get into while sitting, you get into automatically if you go for pradakshina. The place and atmosphere here are like that. However unable a person is to walk, if he once goes round the hill, he will feel like going again and again. The more you go, though, the more the enthusiasm for it. It never decreases. Once a person is accustomed to the happiness of pradakshina, he can never give it up. Just as the mind is automatically attracted to the guru, knowing intuitively that he can bestow eternal bliss for the same reason, the mind feels automatically attracted to Giri Pradakshina, Arunachala Ramana. To understand the power of Arunachala, it is first necessary to understand the relationship that existed between Arunachala and Bhagwan. To Bhagwan, Arunachala was mother, father, guru, and God. It was his all in all, his own self. Sri Bhagwan often said, God, Guru, and self are one and the same, and to him Arunachala was all three of these. In verse 48 of Aksharamanammalai, he refers to Arunachala as his God, in verse 19 as his Guru, and in verse 5 of Atma Vidya Kirtanam, the song on the science of self, as Anamlai, myself. Truly, Arunachala is Ramana and Ramana is Arunachala. The two are inseparable. Arunachala is Ramana in the form of a hill and Ramana is Arunachala in human form. The oneness that Sri Bhagwan felt with Arunachala is disclosed in many of his verses. When a devotee inquired about his true nature, he replied, Arunachala Ramana is the Supreme Self who blissfully abides as consciousness in the heart cave of all souls, beginning with the Hari, Lord Vishnu. The same name, Arunachala Ramana, which he used while referring to himself, he also uses while addressing the hill in the last verse of Aksharamanammalai, and in verse 90 he calls the hill Ramana. When Sri Bhagwan composed Sri Arunachala Pancharatnam, the five gems in Sanskrit, the devotee composed a concluding verse in which he said that these five verses were an Upanishad revealed by Srimad Ramana Maharshi. Later, when Sri Bhagwan translated this Haiman into Tamil, he adapted this concluding verse and substituted the name Arunagiri Ramana for the name Srimad Ramana Maharshi, thereby indicating that it was Arunagiri, Arunachala itself in the form of Ramana who sang his hymns. From all this, it is clear that Sri Bhagwan experienced no individuality or existence of his own separate from Arunachala. Though Bhagwan Ramana has left his human form, he will always remain shining here in the form of Arunachala, giving guidance and solace to his devotees. Therefore, the power of Arunachala is the power of Ramana, the power of Sadguru's grace. O Arunachala, ocean of grace in the form of will bestow grace upon me. So, thank you, my dear friends, for listening this wonderful dis- discourse of mm, this power of Arunachala. Namaskar, dear friends. Please share, like, and comment this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you, my